What is going on here, Giants fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. I haven't done one since April, and I was thinking over the past week, on vacation, I'm like, you know what? When I come back, I have a lot of topics to cover. And then I started thinking, should I get the podcast going? Should I do a live stream? I said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and we're going to do a podcast episode. But you guys can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Obviously, the channel on YouTube. Boys and Big Apple Podcast obviously is there as well. This week it's going to be Friday. Next week it's going to be Monday, most likely, because of our schedules and stuff like that. We're reverting back to Mondays. But you can find this podcast on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all your favorite platforms. Also, as well, this might turn into a regular thing for the season. I know I did videos most of the off season, kind of just like, to have a better time schedule for myself, but there's not going to be, I guess, a direct schedule with this podcast, but it will be probably at least once a week. I'm very excited to bring this back, of course, guests, stuff like that. If you look at the right side of your screen, there are the topics for today. But if you are listening on a podcast platform, preseason week 1 wrap-up, you got the Giants cutting Alfred Morris, Keon Crossan getting traded to the New York Giants, Isaac Yiadom getting traded to the Green Bay Packers, the O-line depth situation, which is very concerning, also the Giants and Browns preview, which is going to be very exciting, going to have a guest on for that one. So the way I'll do the wrap-up for the preseason in terms of week 1 against the Jets is going to be stock up, stock down, teeter-tottering, and basically just a recap of basically what happened and what happened with every position. So, I have more stock up than stock down, honestly, because a lot of the players I did not see like a lot of snaps out of, or it's it's too early to judge on some players. Like Tay Crowder, he had one bad play, but I'm not going to say, well, he had a bad night. No, I'm not going to say that. Also, we're doing snap counts, so that's also going to be a part of the schedule for today in terms of the Week 1 wrap-up. So David Sills, I want to talk about David Sills for a second. He is on the stock up. He had 3 receptions for 49 yards. He dropped 2 passes, and you could debate, it was a bad throw by Torson, this, that, and the other thing. He was targeted 5 times. In my opinion, both of those passes should have been caught. And was Torson a good quarterback in his time with the Giants? Absolutely not. I mean, the one game being the Jets game that he showed, he wasn't good. He was like 5 for 16 or something like that. But if you're going to make the roster, if you're going to stand out from some of the other receivers that are competing, you need to do stuff. And David Sills has always been known as not like a route runner, not a Kadarius Toney type of guy, but a guy where he's going to go out and get the football, kind of like a Kenny Galladay. I'm not saying he's Kenny Galladay, or a Darius Slayton kind of guy. And those were ideally 2 passes, the 4th down one being the most kind of resonating with what David Sills and the type of receiver he is. With that being said, he should have caught that 4th down one. But, so far he's had a good camp. So far, other than those 2 drops, however you want to define them, he had some good targets, good receptions, whatever you want to call it. He did have that big, I think it was like a 34-yard reception. He beat, I believe it was Brandon Eichels or somebody on the outside to get a big gain. Unfortunately, the Giants did not score on that drive. I forget how that ended, but it did not end in a touchdown. Only one drive ended in a touchdown, unfortunately. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of people are worrying about the offensive line, the starting offensive line. Can't say that I am as of right now. As of right now, I'm not saying, a week or 2 I won't be throwing all my stuff away, burning papers, doing shit like that. With that being said, I thought the starting O-line didn't do that bad. There's 2 players that I would point out that didn't really do good. Well, actually, one on just one play, and then he did fine the rest of the game. One player was absolute garbage. So you take a look at the offensive line. I'll set it like this. They were in for like 2-3 series. You had Andrew Thomas, who didn't play bad. He played very well. Obviously, you guys can trust Bobby Skinner with the film breakdowns and stuff like that. He was a former offensive lineman. I'm not, so I'm not going to be doing this stuff. But he said that, sometimes he would trust his athleticism a little too much. But with that being said, Thomas really didn't have a bad play. He actually tossed a guy to the ground on one of the snaps, but it was an incomplete pass. But that's still worthy of showing on tape and stuff like that. Kenny Wiggins, the left guard, he was absolute trash. That's the guy that I was talking about. This guy, was one of the guys on the offensive line that really didn't play well. Kenny Wiggins did not play well. Getting beat inside, stuff like that. And a lot of people can say, oh, Shane Lemieux, he's bad in pass protection. Kenny Wiggins has started how many games in his career, and he's been in the NFL since, I think, 2014, if I'm going to say that. Yeah, 2014, and even then, if it's not 2012 or whatever year he started playing, he's had veteran experience. He's like 30, 31, 32 years old. You have to know that stuff by now. And obviously, this is why he's gotten cut from multiple rosters in Detroit and Los Angeles. So that's kind of my thought process on him. He wasn't doing well. He didn't do good with the second team either. I mean, the second team was just straight up monkey garbage. I mean, if I'm putting it bluntly, they were not good. They were trash. I'm not saying, oh, well, they're going to make the roster, stuff like that, but that's depth on the roster. That's something very concerning for the New York Giants, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Nick Gates played well. Will Hernandez played awesome. I'd love to see that out of Will Hernandez. Sure, it's one game. It's preseason. But he did really well in pass blocking and in run blocking as well. I saw the pulls he was doing. He looks faster in that. He did lose, I believe, about 20 pounds to kind of make him go faster. And with that being said, you go to Matt Parrott, who both of them have actually been working out this offseason. With that being said, Parrott did struggle on one snap. He got beat on the edge by Bryce Huff. He opened up his hips too early. And, Glennon got sacked, unfortunately. But the rest of the game, he was fine. Obviously there's some nooks and crannies within his play, but nothing that cannot be fixed. So, am I too worried about the starting O-line? I want to get Shane Lemieux back, of course. But am I too worried about Gates and Hernandez and Thomas? Not really worried, honestly. But we'll talk about that later in the show. Carter Coughlin, he had a excellent night. Sure, you could say, oh, well, it's, against 2-teamers, 3-teamers, whatever you want to talk about. But Coughlin did well. Obviously, he has versatility on the edge, and now he's at inside linebacker. Now he's going to be the starter? Of course not. But with that being said, he has versatility, wherever he plays. Inside linebacker, he can rush the passer. Edge, if he plays on the edge, well, he's going to go out and cover for you. Or just do something in the run game. Like, he's fast. He's got good athleticism. He's got good IQ. And he actually had a big night. At least that I would say and many other people would say. 5 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. Unfortunately, it was recovered by the Jets, but that's still something there. Whether you force it with your hand or your helmet, he still made a play. Congratulations, Carter Coughlin. Sandro Platzgummer. I've been saying Platzgummer for the last 12 months plus. I don't know why I've been saying that. But 4 attempts, 51 rushing yards, and 1 target. Unfortunately, the target that was thrown at him, that was just a total bullet of a check down. Like, why are you throwing that? A, he's covered. B, why are you throwing it 700 miles an hour? Again, this is why Clayton Thorson is no longer on the roster, despite the fact that he has a concussion. Obviously, I don't wish that among anybody. But with that being said, he had that long, I think it was like 49-yard run or something like that. He later got I think it was like a 2-yard loss after that run, but that was a big run. And Gary Brightwell didn't play. The running game was meh, but that was probably the first best or second best offensive play of the game, other than the Sills thing. And a lot of these pathway program guys don't get on the roster. They don't get on NFL rosters. They just, get a chance in the preseason, their exemption, and then they don't do anything. But Sandro Platzgummer honestly has a chance with the way Corey Clement played, excuse me for the stuttering, with the way Clement played on that fumble. Now, if he didn't fumble, obviously the chances for Platzgummer would simmer. And we wouldn't be talking about him possibly making the roster as much or whatever. And Brightwell didn't play once again as I added. But Platzgummer, he had a good night. Unfortunately, once again, that target was 700 miles an hour. But he had that nice big run. And not just that it was, the biggest offensive play of the game, it got them out of the end zone. Because if it wasn't for that, and if it wasn't for the missed tackle by someone who actually tried to tackle him for a safety, they missed the tackle blatantly, and he just cut to the outside. The offense would likely have not had as much yards as they had, obviously. And it's not like that really counted for anything because Giants did not score points on that drive, unfortunately, once again. So the next player, CJ Board, I thought he did decently. 2 kick returns, 49 yards, 2 punt returns, 31 yards, and 2 targets. I honestly like what he brought to the special teams aspect. Obviously, last year, special teams struggled. He didn't really get any chances, or if he got chances, he didn't get much on kick returning and punt returning. But with the starters not playing in week 1, a lot of guys got to showcase, what they could do. CJ Board, obviously more than just a special teams guy, a receiver, and a kick returner, punt returner, just in case Jabril Peppers or John Ross gets injured. Both those guys, I think, were up and practicing. If they weren't, then they're still injured. I'm talking in season, of course. I'm not talking just the actual situation right now. But I thought CJ Board didn't actually do bad. I thought he did decent on kick returns. Now, I'm not a special teams guy, but that's just the eye test. That's what I saw. The next guy, Rice and John, 3 receptions, 14 yards, and 4 targets. I don't think he's a bad guy either. I think that last year we didn't get to see him, so we didn't know what the fuck to expect. But with this guy, he actually did decent against the Jets. He's been decent in camp. And I think if Kyle Rudolph, whether he gets activated off PUP or he doesn't before the season, I think that 3rd, 4th tight end spot is open between Rice and John, Cole Hicatini, Nakia Griffin-Stewart. There's a lot of guys there because Toilolo tore his ACL or Achilles. I still get them mixed up to this day. I don't know why. Don't ask me that. But I think Rice and John could potentially be a guy that makes this roster as a 4th tight end. But once again, we're only going off 1 game. And also there's other tight ends. With that being said, he's also eligible for the practice squad again. So we'll see what happens. Isaac Yiadom, obviously he's gone now. But I didn't think he had a bad game. Isaac Yiadom, I didn't think he had a bad game. Obviously, he's gone to Green Bay now. They did the zone stuff. They didn't really do a lot of man-to-man. Rodarius Williams, he did struggle a little bit. We'll talk about that later. Madre Harper obviously wasn't that great. But Isaac Yiadom didn't do bad. I didn't really see any receptions that he gave up. If he gave up receptions, then they were short. They weren't, any touchdown receptions or any stuff like that. Long receptions and whatever. But I thought Yiadom played well, and if he would have stayed, I thought he would have been a depth piece. Obviously, I did a roster bubble video on him just a few short weeks ago, and obviously that doesn't mean anything now because, well, he got traded for Josh Jackson. We'll talk about that later in the show once again. Matt Cole, he did not really play much offensive snaps, but that one special team where he knocked it out of the end zone, that was a good play. And we've been looking for guys that can be gunners and stuff like that. But if you show that, and a lot of these wide receivers and cornerbacks and stuff like that, usually in the 4th game on a regular basis, going back to years and years and years, even with the Shermer era and whoever, if you were on the cusp of making the roster and getting cut, special teams was your way of getting onto the roster. Like Cody Core, the Giants saw special teams duties and abilities in him, so that's why they picked him up and cut Alonzo Russell, because I guess they didn't see Alonzo Russell as a special teams guy. Once again, that was in the Shermer era, but in terms of Matt Cole, he made a great play, and obviously that stands out to Joe Judge and Thomas McGahee, who are both special teams coaches. And then you look at the next guy, the final guy for stock up, Damian Willis, 2 targets, 1 reception, 21 yards, and a touchdown. He should have had a second touchdown, but Clayton Thorson wildly overthrew him. And once again, that's probably why he's not on the roster, other than the fact that he has a concussion. But, Willis worked his way in route running against Corey Ballantyne, the former New York Giant, and he got a touchdown. Thorson came out of the pocket, just threw it up. That was, 21-yard touchdown, exactly. So, that is for the stock up. Stock down, we're going to talk about Clayton Thorson is our first guy. 5 for 16, 72 yards, a touchdown, and 4 sacks. I'm not saying that the offensive line did not have an impact on Thorson. but he was wildly inaccurate. We mentioned already the Damian Willis touchdown, the check down attempt to Sandro Platzgummer, some of the other passes in the game. He was not good. And you can make the excuse, oh, well, he hasn't played preseason in 2 years. I don't know that that's a guy you're going to be wanting, especially, once again, it was 1 week. But I don't know that's a guy that you're going to be wanting on your practice squad just in case you have to call him up because Daniel Jones or Mike Lennon gets injured. We'll see what Brian Lewerke does this week. Lewerke, I don't know how to pronounce his name. But hopefully he's slightly better than Torson, but I'm not going to guarantee that because he's never played in the preseason. Though Lewerke has played with the Spring League Football League or the SFL or something like that, Spring League Football, so he does have some experience with lower level players. Obviously he is one, he's not a franchise quarterback, but in terms of Torson, he got released or is on IR with an injury designation, some shit like that, but he just wasn't good. He was not good. He was awful. Sorry, we have to spit the facts here. Mike Lennon, 3 for 7, 20 yards and 1 sack. Obviously, the 1 sack wasn't his fault. Some say he held on to the ball for too long. I say Matt Parrott got beat on the outside and Bryce Huff got the best of him on that 1 snap. But Glennon didn't do so great either. Some were wild incompletions, but he only threw the ball 7 times, which is obviously why he was not as bad as Clayton Torson. And he only played, 2-3 series. The rest of the game was Clayton Torson's. And obviously, that plays into why the offense didn't score more than once. The next guy probably deals with most of the second O-line. Jake Burton, Kenny Wiggins, and Chad Slade. I'll break them down slowly. Jake Burton wasn't good on the inside. Pressures, sacks, stuff like that. Same thing could be said with Kenny Wiggins. Even on the first team, he was getting beat on the inside. I'll say this, and I'm not an O-line guy, as I've mentioned 27 times before. But it's better to get beat on the outside as a tackle because at least the quarterback can step up in the pocket. If you get beat on the inside as a guard, the quarterback has to run to the right or just run to the left. That's harder. Because what if the other defensive end has nice contain and gets a sack on the quarterback? Then you're screwed. So obviously, being that Burton and Wiggins didn't play well, and Chad Slade didn't play well either. I thought he was okay to below average. He was the right tackle, of course. That's different than the offensive guard spots. But also as well as the fact that Jonathan Harrison didn't play. Joe Looney and Zach Fulton retired. So these are the guys we're literally trusting with our lives as of right now as depth pieces on the roster, unless, and this is likely, unless they go out and get somebody near the waiver claim deadline or wherever that is. That's usually after the 53-man cutdown. So obviously we can't predict that, but I think that's going to happen if the Giants don't find a guy to back up Shane Lemieux and Hernandez. Unless Jonathan Harrison reverts to guard and stuff like that, but you do need a backup center, and I don't think they're leaving one interior offensive lineman as their backup offensive lineman for the interior. I just don't think that's going to happen. Madre Harper, he didn't necessarily do well. He got that 1 pass interference penalty where he grabbed the guy's jersey, almost got the interception for the touchdown. But in terms of that, just wasn't good. In zone coverage, man coverage. Obviously, once again, they played a lot of zone. But Madre Harper, I felt, did not play a good game. Not saying I won't be rooting for him to make the roster or any stuff like that, but right now he has to still fight an uphill battle. We have yet to see the other cornerbacks play being the starters, but now with Josh Jackson coming in, Keon Crossan coming in, he has to prove his spot even more and even more. You look at teeter-tottering, Corey Clement. 5 rushes, 32 yards, and a fumble. If it wasn't for the fumble, he'd be stock up because he was one of the reasons that the running game, was teeter-tottering. If it wasn't for him and maybe the 1 or 2 runs by Devontae Booker and Sandro Platzgummer as well, running game would absolutely be nothing, and we'd be talking about how the Giants are bad in the running game again, at least in the preseason. But Corey Clement did have approximately about 6 yards per carry before the fumble, unfortunately, and you cannot fumble in the red zone. I'm not saying that Clement will make the roster because of that, but when you know that this team has had red zone issues year after year after year, and then you fumble in the red zone, and your team hasn't scored yet. That's kind of tough to swallow if you're one of the Giants coaches. Just saying. And then with Darius Williams, he had some nice plays. He had some good plays, bad plays, whatever. I just think that he had more of a struggling night. But as Patrick Graham said, it wasn't necessarily all that bad because he got the experience, he got the targets, he got the plays made. And this is a sixth-round guy. This is probably the most, in my personal opinion, he's going to ever play this season, whether it's preseason or special teams. Because if you look at the cornerbacks on the Giants roster, they have good depth at the corner spot. You got Love, who could play safety and corner. You obviously got the two starting, Adoree Jackson and James Bradbury. You got Darnay Holmes, who played a little bit in this game. You have Keon Crossan. You have Josh Jackson. You have some of the other guys on this roster. Maybe Aaron Robinson comes back in time for the 53-man cutdown. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he starts the year on PUP, stuff like that. But Rodarius Williams, this is good for him. You know, maybe it's not encouraging that he gave up, 99 yards on 8 receptions and 10 targets and stuff like that. But you have to look at the brighter side of things, the silver lining. Gave up a lot of receptions, got a lot of targets thrown at him, but this is a learning experience. And you can't expect, the sixth-round pick, he's going to make 7 plays in a row. No, sixth-round pick for a reason. And a lot of people felt that he was supposed to go in the third round. Obviously, there was a reason that he got delayed till the bitter end of the sixth round. I would say, Mr. Irrelevant of the Giants draft class. But real quickly, before we break into our next subject, here is the breakdown of snaps coming from the Jets game. So you got Kenny Wiggins, who played 85%, David Sills 67%, Jackson Barton 62%, Jake Burton 62%, Brett Hedgie 62%, Chad Slade 62%, Clayton Thorson 62%, Dante Pettis 50%, Alex Bachman 48%, Andrew Thomas 38%, same with Caden Smith, Matt Parrott, Mike Glennon, Nick Gates, and Will Hernandez. Obviously, those are the starters except for Glennon. I'm talking, of course, about the offensive line and Caden Smith being a tight end. Then you go to C.J. Board, who played 35%, Hikatini 33%, Nakia Griffin-Stewart 27%, Darius Slayton 27%, who played mostly with the starters, and then Rice and John at 25%. And then after Rice and John is Corey Clement, who played 23% of the snaps, and it was pretty much split even from there. You take a look at the defensive side, if I could pull that up just real quickly. Madre Harper played 87% of the defensive snaps for Darius Williams, 79%. Trent Harris, 77%, who did make some plays. Devontae Downs, 69%. Quincy Wilson, 68%. Isaac Yadam, 65%. Chris Johnson, the free safety, 64%. Raymond Johnson, 64% as well. Nico Lalo, 61%. David Moa, the defensive tackle, 53%, who did have a forced fumble, I believe. Josh Kalu, who unfortunately tore his pectoral and is now on IR. We'll talk about that just in a little bit. 47%. Reggie Ragland, 44%. Efedio Denigbo, 42%. Elijah Quall is defensive tackle, 36%. William Henry, 36%. Carter Coughlin, 31%. BJ Hill, 31%. Julian Love, 29%. Austin Johnson, 26%. Tay Crowder, 23%. Aziz Ojolari, 21%. And Danny Shelton, 21%. That pretty much wraps it up for the defensive side. Also, TJ Brunson played 14% of the snaps before he tore his ACL. Obviously, that is not something good to see if you're a New York Giants fan in terms of linebacker depth, but it was debatable whether Brunson would have made an impact on this roster in 2021 or not. So that's pretty much that. So let's start out this segment with some transactions that have happened within the past week. Giants cut down their roster to about 86, 85 players, one exemption being Sandro Platzgummer, part of the Pathway program. Kyle Murphy, he was put on IR with an ankle injury. That means he's out for the season unless he gets cut with an injury designation. TJ Brunson, who had that big forced fumble, later leading to a Giants touchdown, tore his ACL. He's out for the season. And Josh Kalu, the former Tennessee Titan, he's out for the season with a torn pectoral. So obviously, hope they all have a speedy recovery. Then, as a part of cutdowns, I don't know if this is in chronological order or not, but these are all transactions that have happened in the past week. The Giants also cut Alfred Morris, who had 2 rushes and -4 yards in the Jets game. And they also cut Chris Milton, who did not play against the New York Jets. So those 2 guys were cut. Also as well, the Giants acquired Keon Crossan from the Houston Texans for a 6th-round pick in 2023. So that's obviously a little while from now. But Crossan mainly brings special teams value. Obviously last year with all the punt coverage and the kick return coverage, not great. Crossan, he was a 2nd-round pick of the New England Patriots. So obviously you see the Patriot connection here. Played a total of 11 games in 2018, 2019, played all 16. Started 4 games in 2020 with the Texans. Obviously, they weren't a good team. And then he played all 16 games there, but got most of his playing time in Houston, not really in New England. But in terms of the stats, now stats can be taken this way or that way. But in Houston, his completion percentage and a lot of the other things are not bad for his type of a caliber corner. Now, the first 2 years in New England, 2018, he allowed 7 completions on 8 targets, total 97 yards, no touchdowns, 117.2 passer rating, and an 87.5 completion rating. The following year, with the Texans, I think I messed up before, but he was with the Texans in 2019. I think they traded him to the Texans in 2019. But he allowed a 66.7 completion percentage, 4 completions on 6 targets, 35 yards, no touchdowns, and 81.9 passer rating. Then he got the most playing time in 2020 when they were short on corners and stuff like that. Allowed 20 completions on 35 targets, 57.1 completion percentage, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, and a 91.6 passer rating. So not too bad for Keon Crossan. Obviously, this makes the cornerback battle even more interesting. I think he's possibly a lock to make this roster now that they gave up a draft pick for him and stuff like that. The same could be said about Josh Jackson, but obviously it was corner for corner. No draft picks have been exchanged as of yet. But Keon Crossan bringing the experience from last year and now this year, or I should say in past years with the special teams, I think he's a possible lock to make this roster, possibly decreasing the chances for guys like Madre Harper, Jaron Williams, and some other guys like that. Now we get into the bigger transaction. The Giants traded Isaac Yiadom to Green Bay for Josh Jackson. Obviously, everybody remembers that Isaac Yiadom was traded to the New York Giants for, I believe it was a 7th-round draft pick in the 2021 draft. With that being said, Yiadom allowed a completion percentage of 61.7 this year, was the Giants' number 2 cornerback for most of this season. Allowed 37 completions on 60 targets, 6 touchdowns, 120.1 passer rating, and 480 yards total, if I didn't already say that. So, I will admit that I hated on, or I disliked Isaac Yiadom more than he deserved. He was the worst player, or was a bad player on a good defense. But now that we have Adoree Jackson, and now that we have Keon Crossan, his chances were slowly going down. And I guess now they could take a chance on someone who was a draft bust of the Green Bay Packers. We'll talk about him in just a second. But in prior years, Yiadom was, I believe, a 3rd-round pick of the Denver Broncos out of Boston College. He played 13 games with them. His rookie year started 1 and even had an interception. 2019, he played all 16 games and started 8 games. And then in 2020, obviously, he was traded to the New York Giants. You look at Josh Jackson. I did not know much about this guy. I knew a little of him. But a lot of Packer fans are happy. A lot of Packer fans saying they won the trade and stuff like that. We won't know for a little bit, but I'll obviously give my thoughts after I give the stats and stuff like that. Now, last year in Green Bay, Josh Jackson started a total of 5 games, appeared in 12. He had 23 receptions, 31 targets, 285 yards, and 1 touchdown with a passer rating of 113. Not great. You look at 2019, started no games. 14 games he appeared in, allowed 6 completions on 7 targets, 85.7 completion percentage, 63 yards, and a 143.7 passer rating with 1 touchdown allowed. Not great, obviously. That was, I guess, in limited time. Then 2018, his rookie year out of Iowa State, started 10 games, played in 16, 40 completions allowed on 64 targets, 62.5 completion percentage allowed, 3 touchdowns, 557 yards, and a 106.1 passer rating. So obviously right now it looks as if the New York Giants have lost the trade, but I'm taking the silver lining road on this one. Why will I take the silver lining road? It's a depth move. Obviously, it's a cornerback for a cornerback. You take a look. Obviously, as of right now, barring any injuries, hopefully not, the starting cornerbacks are James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, and Darnay Holmes. The rest of the cornerbacks, probably going to be 2 or 3 cornerbacks held, are going to be depth guys. They're not going to start much. Rodarius Williams could definitely be a part of that cornerback crew, maybe getting a little playing time. Keon Crossan maybe it's Josh Jackson, which is likely at this point now that they traded for him and gave up something, but also, once again, he could get cut, and maybe Green Bay uses Isaac Yiadom. It could turn out in 750,000 ways. Now, Josh Jackson obviously was a draft bust, and this is solely a depth move, as I said. But there is a point to make, and obviously he ain't no proven guy yet. He has been below average most of his career in Green Bay. But someone brought up to me, you see how Casey Hayward and Micah Hyde broke out as soon as they left Green Bay? Now, obviously, it wasn't the same defensive coordinator. They had Dom Capers, I think, when McCarthy was the head coach, and then now they have Mike Pettin, the former Browns head coach, as the defensive coordinator. So obviously you could twist and turn that multiple ways. But for right now, I think this is an even thing for the Giants, even thing for the Packers. I'm not going to make any verdicts, but they're taking a flyer on a guy who was draft bust. Possibly Patrick Graham could put him in the system, rotate him, use him to his strengths, and then go from there. Maybe he turns out to be a decent pick, kind of a Corey Clement kind of guy, when he was with the Giants just for a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. Real quickly, before we get to the Browns preview, I have obviously some comments to make about the offensive line. The offensive line depth isn't so good for the Giants. It's not. Obviously, you have Shea Lemieux, who's injured, probably should be ready for week 1, but we don't know that as a fact right now. We're making predictions and all these sorts of other things as of right now. Then you have Kenny Wiggins starting at left guard, and tackles, I think we're fine in terms of depth. I think we're fine in terms of tackle depth. You have Nate Solder, who's the backup, the sole backup, maybe can play some guard, maybe. I'm not stretching anything. So likely you have Parrott and Thomas. Then behind him, you have Nate Solder, which is, once again, something I don't have a problem with. Center, right now it looks like Jonathan Harrison's going to be that guy. That's filled out. So that's probably about, if Lemieux is ready week 1, about 7 linemen right now. Now, in my opinion, they'll probably keep 8 to 10 linemen. So you need to figure out who is going to be at that backup guard spot. And I'm going to tell you right now, Chad Slay don't look good for it. Kenny Wiggins don't look good for it. Jake Burton don't look good for it. Brett Hedgie don't look good for it. That's the unfortunate part. And that is really a kick in the ass coming after the Zach Fulton retirement, coming after the Joe Looney retirement. Because ideally, you would have been looking at this 1,000 different ways that are better than what we have right now. Because let's just say those 2 players didn't retire. Joe Looney, he would have been probably the backup center. Zach Fulton probably would have been the backup guard. And he would probably have been starting at left guard against the Jets if he didn't retire. So that probably would have been your roster. Maybe you keep Harrison on as an extra center, a guard, something like that. Fulton can also play center as well, or could have played center. Then you have Nate Solder as the backup tackle. Now we're put into this, I'm going to be blunt here, shithole. We're put into this shithole. So here are a couple of guys that could possibly fill in as guard depth for the New York Giants. Some of them can play tackle, only one of them realistically. So you have Joe Dahl, the former 5th-round pick of the Detroit Lions. Started a total of 21 games in his career, 44 games appeared in, and he's 28 years old, was picked in 2016, spent pretty much his whole career with the Lions. They cut him after a failed injury designation in March, and he has not been picked up since. He's been worked out, but nobody has taken a flyer on this guy. I think he would be a decent option. Move to the next guy. Nick Easton, 29 years old, has made 32 starts in his career, total of 45 games played in. Had spent a little time in 2015 with the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers. Spent an extensive amount of his career with the Minnesota Vikings from 2015 to 2018. Was primarily the left guard or right guard there. Then in New Orleans, started some games, I think, with one of their guards out. They had guard trouble a little bit. I think Andres Pete was out a couple of games. Their right guard was out a couple of games, Cesar Ruiz or whoever. I know he did start a couple of games for them from 2019 to 2020. The next guy seems very familiar. I don't think the Giants are going to take a flyer on this guy because of his ties to the organization, and also for the fact that Dave Gettleman did not pick up or did not sign this guy to an extension years before. DJ Fluker. This guy can play tackle and guard, better at guard though. Played decently for the New York Giants in 2017, would have been a better solution than Patrick Omameh. Obviously, we see how that turned out. Fluker spent the first 3 to 4 years of his career with the San Diego/Los Angeles Chargers. Then he got signed by the Giants in 2017. After that, went to the Seattle Seahawks from 2018 to 2019. 2020, he spent with the Baltimore Ravens and spent some time with the Miami Dolphins in camp this year, but obviously was released after the fact. He was a first-round pick out of Alabama, so obviously the Nick Saban connection, the Joe Judge connection. I don't know if he was there when Joe Judge was there. It's a possibility. So he was drafted in, 2013? So it is a sheer possibility that Fluker and Judge may have crossed paths. He started a total of 96 games in his career so far. He's 30 years old, and he's appeared in 108 games. The last guy has been the hot topic of O-line depth for the New York Giants. Austin Reiter began his career with the Washington football team 2015 and 2016. 2016 and 2017 with the Cleveland Browns. Kansas City from 2018 to 2020. They replaced him at center. I forget who they got, but they did not pick up anything on Reiter. I guess they thought better of that. And now he's a free agent. He's been worked out by multiple teams. I think the Bengals worked him out. The Giants should have worked him out. I don't know what happened there. But he was a Super Bowl champion 2 years ago. Total of 33 starts in his career and 59 games. So these are all valuable options. I'm not taking a flyer on David DeCastro because he's coming off that leg injury. We God knows if he still has it. So I'm not taking a flyer on that. That would not be a great thing, even if it's a 1-year veteran minimum deal. And also, this is a guy who probably is expecting a little more than just $1 million a year, being the fact that he's been a Pro Bowler in many years past. As of right now, the only veteran on our offensive line is Ted Larson, who hasn't played in a real game in 2 years. I think, if I'm standing correctly on this subject, he has played multiple teams in his career. He's 34, and he just looks 34. He looks like the oldest guy on the team. Ted Larson has spent time with the New England Patriots, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from 2010 2013, Cardinals 2014 2015, 2016 with the Bears, 2017, 2018 with the Miami Dolphins during the Gase era. I think he started at guard or center for most of his time there. The Bears in 2019. The Bucs back in 2020. He didn't really play any games with them, got elevated from the practice squad multiple times, was a Super Bowl champion, and obviously now with the New York Giants. So, would I really rely on Ted Larson to be the backup guard? If he plays well, sure. But if he doesn't play well, you're shit out of luck. So, I gave you guys a list of guys that we could possibly take flyers on as backup guards, backup offensive linemen at the interior position. Nick Easton, I believe, other than Austin Reiter, is the only guy that can play center. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I would definitely take a chance on one of these guys rather than stay with what we have in Jake Burton, Brett Hedgie, Kenny Wiggins, and all these other guys. So now let's move to the Browns preview. All right, so now for our Giants Cleveland Browns preview. They play on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Now I'd like to welcome on Rod Bluhm, if I'm saying that correctly, of the Browns Blitz Podcast. Rod, thank you for coming on the show, and tell the viewers where they could find you at, and basically give a description.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. They can find me on Twitter at CleRodB, and my podcast is the Browns Blitz. You can find that at the Browns Blitz.
Nice. So to get things started, obviously, we had a joint practice today, both teams. Some real quick takeaways that I got on my cheat sheet here on my laptop. I know Jarvis Landry was a big factor in today's practice. He had that one-handed catch. I know both offenses were doing well. The quarterbacks seemed to be doing well, so there wasn't really much defensive playing for two defensive teams. But it seemed like, there was no really fights involved, even though there was, some trash talking and stuff like that. And Kevin Stefanski and Joe Judge basically went over with their players that basically, listen, there's not going to be any fighting or whatnot. Jabril Peppers had some good trash talk with his former team. Obviously, Giants fans are so much connected to OBJ, even though they won't see him play. They were supposed to see him play, obviously, last year. Didn't happen with the injury. What are your thoughts? Have you seen anything on today's joint practices? Obviously, there's another one happening again before the game.
I got to watch part of it today. Got to watch some of it, stream today. And, the part I saw, the Browns defense actually looked pretty decent. I saw the part where there was a pick and a couple of passes defensed and that. So, but, I only saw a small portion of it. So, it looked good and clean. Like the teams were, respecting each other and everything, which is good. So kind of working on things and that. So, I guess it's what both coaches want to get out of something like this. So, I don't know if there's any big secrets that they're going to display in a practice like this, but good practice, good, clean fun out there. Guys helping each other up and things like that. So, looked good to me.
Now, you guys drafted, obviously, the point, or one of the many points of the preseason is to help develop the draft picks. Obviously, didn't have that last year. You guys drafted a lot of players. You drafted James Hudson. I'm not going any specific order. James Hudson, the tackle at Cincinnati, Anthony Schwartz, Demetric Felton. Obviously, your second-round pick, JOK. I'm a big Notre Dame fan, so I knew a little bit about JOK before the draft. Richard LeQuinte, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, my mistake.
It's LeCount. Yeah, LeCount. Yeah.
Now I know how to say that. Richard
there you
LeCount, go. Greg Newsome, and Tony Fields. So how have your draft picks played through camp mostly within this period of time? And how did they do last week against Jacksonville? How did the team fare as a whole throughout camp? Who's been great? Who's been not so great? Give us a little description on who's been good in terms of draft picks, just overall players as well.
Well, JOK played the entire game, last week, the first preseason game against the Jaguars. So, and he was out of practice for a while with due to COVID. So I think it was kind of a conditioning thing, why they had him play the entire game, and he looked good. I mean, he had a sack, he was making tackles sideline to sideline, breaking out passes deep, and just very impactful. I think it's about all we could have expected from him in his first action at the NFL level. So everybody's very excited about JOK. I think, can't wait to see him play in a regular game. Greg Newsome, he played. He's been doing great in practice. In the preseason game, he played a bit, but not a ton. So just kind of got a glimpse of him. He looked fine, but not a whole lot there. You mentioned James Hudson. He started out. Trying to think, I think he started out at right tackle in the preseason game, and then he switched to left tackle, which kind of tells you that the Browns are probably grooming him to be their swing man. He did fine. I think he had one penalty, a false start, or a holding call, but he played quite a bit in that preseason game. So he's had a lot of time with Bill Callahan on his own, the Browns offensive line coach. So I think we're pretty optimistic about James Hudson and where he's going to be at some point. As far as trying to think of who else all the other draft picks. Let's go to the wide receiver. Anthony Schwartz, he's kind of been, he really hasn't, well, he didn't play because of a hamstring kind of issue. They're kind of nursing him. The Browns have had quite a few hamstring issues, and we really don't know how serious some of them are, or if they're just being super cautious with these guys. So he hasn't played yet. He's looked really good in some practices. The guy's super fast, so we'll find out sooner or later. But I think he's going to be an impact guy. It's a matter of how much playing time he gets because of how deep the Browns are at wide receiver. Demetric Felton played. He played exclusively wide receiver in the first preseason game, and this against the Giants. Apparently, he's going to be playing almost exclusively running back. He's been working out with the running backs all week, and we'll see. Because we don't really know what he is yet. He played both positions in college. We don't know if he's trying to be the third running back or the fourth or fifth, or not the fourth or fifth, maybe the sixth wide receiver, or a gadget guy or what he is. So kind of determining what he is and where he falls is going to help some of us understand the construction of the 53-man roster once we see what he can do. Richard LeCount looked excellent in the first preseason game for a guy who hasn't played much football in 2 years. And, he didn't look perfect, but I mean, he looked like a steal for how late the Browns took him. I think he was a 6th round pick this year, if I'm not mistaken. And he's like the Browns. I think he's number 5 on the depth chart at safety right now. So, and who am I missing? I think I'm missing somebody because I didn't go in any kind of order. Tony Fields, I really haven't seen much of, so I'm not sure. I think Tony Fields, I think people like him and what he brings, but the linebacker room is pretty competitive. So I think he's got a chance. I think he'll probably be a special teams guy, more than likely. I haven't heard a whole heck of a lot about him, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I would be surprised if he doesn't make the team based on what I've heard, but I think he'll be a special teams guy this year.
And one more quick question. I don't know if he's gotten some playing time. He was a 4th-round pick. Tommy, I can't even pronounce his last name, Togai, something like that.
Oh, Tommy Togai. Yeah, he played a little bit, or I don't want to say a little bit. I think he played in the 4th quarter of the first preseason game, maybe some in the 3rd. So the Browns have a whole bunch of DTs that they're kind of trying to figure out, and they just let one guy go today. So they're kind of whittling that room down a little bit, but they got a bunch of guys. They got like 6 or 8 guys, vying for like 4 spots that are left open there probably. So I don't know that we saw enough out of any of them in that first preseason game to say, hey, this guy's good enough to make the team and this guy's not. Because when you've got rookies out there in the 4th quarter playing against the Jaguars' 3rd team, and you don't have a lot of stats to back it up, it's really hard. Unless you really watch a ton of film on it, it's really hard to figure out what's going on. So I think, I think the defensive line and Tommy Togiai and a bunch of other guys, that's going to come down to what happens over all 3 preseason games.
Now, obviously, the Browns made certain headlines this offseason, signing a couple of nice players, in my opinion. They signed John Johnson from the Rams, I believe it was, Troy Hill, and a couple other guys. How do you guys actually, let me transition to a different question. You guys already have what seems like to be one of the better or most underrated defensive lines in the NFL, Myles Garrett and all those other guys. You guys, as in the Cleveland Browns, took flyers on 2 separate draft picks from a couple of years ago that really haven't panned out. It's Takaris McKinley and Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney obviously is the more popular one because a lot of teams, it seems like every offseason, where's Jadeveon Clowney going to sign? How much is he going to sign for? Obviously, it was teeter-tottering, Browns or nobody, and then he finally signed with the Browns. How has he looked? How has Takk McKinley looked? And do they have a role with the Cleveland Browns, or is it just going to be a rotational thing? How are they doing it with, I think, the defensive coordinator is Joe Woods? How are they planning to do
Yeah.
it? What's the take on them? What's the story on them? How do fans feel on those two guys getting flyers from the Cleveland Browns?
Jadeveon Clowney has looked amazing. Of course, he didn't play in the first preseason game. The Browns held out almost all their starters on offense and defense. But in practice, there have been times when people watching practice have said if the defense was allowed to touch the quarterback in practice, that somebody said one day that Jadeveon Clowney would have had 20 sacks one practice. So he's beating guys on the Browns offensive line, which granted they're trying new stuff, so maybe they're not giving it their best shot every single time because they're working on technique and everything, but he's been pretty amazing. So the hope is he can stay healthy. He seems healthy now, and we're just hoping that he and Miles can play a whole bunch of games together. And I think it's going to be a really good thing for the Browns if they can, because so far Jadeveon Clowney's looked really, really good.
Obviously, there was an instance of this last season against the Giants. How is the kicking battle look? Because I know you guys still have Cody Park, and you also have Chase McLaughlin, who's been about everywhere since the start of his career in 2018, 2019. I know he spent a little time with the Chargers and the 49ers, a couple other teams. How have both of them looked? And if you could take a kicker, which one would you take? Because obviously Cody Parkey, I don't know how he did last season, but obviously it was his bigger year since being with the Bears a couple of years ago.
Well, I think we're hoping that a lot of games won't come down to the kicker. So, Cody Parkey kicked, I think it was a field goal. He bounced one off the bar in the first preseason game. It's like, I don't know. Does he practice this or what? I don't know how you hit the bar so consistently. He's been around, he knows, at least he's familiar with kicking in Cleveland and stuff. So I would think he probably has the edge, but I think it's going to come down to probably how they both kick over the 3 preseason games and just who the coaching staff likes better. Kicking is such a crapshoot. I'm amazed at how many kickers just bounce from team to team to team, and most teams just are not happy with their kicker because I don't know. It seems like kicking's gotten harder over the years, and I know they moved the extra point back, but I guess the expectations have gone up too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but one of the storylines, obviously, across the NFL is multiple players rehabbing torn ACLs, Achilles, stuff like that. Obviously, with our team, we have Saquon Barkley. Your team has OBJ. Obviously, that's a big story, but I do want to hear what's been going on, if you've heard anything about Grant Delpit, the second-round draft pick from last year. Has anything been going on with him? How is he doing in his rehab? Same thing with OBJ.
Grant Delpit passed his physical for the Achilles. So he was practicing, and then he had a hamstring issue. And he was out for a couple weeks with a hamstring issue as camp was starting. And then I want to say Tuesday, he came out to practice. So the Browns actually had they actually had John Johnson, Grant Delpit, and Ronnie Harrison on the field together for a brief period of time because Ronnie Harrison had been out with a hamstring as well. And all of a sudden, these guys were all out there together. And then it came over Twitter pretty quickly that Grant Delpit had left the field with his hamstring bothering him. So hopefully it's something minor. I mean, it sounded like he's, aggravated it, and it's going to be a couple of weeks. So they're talking that he may be doubtful for the first week of the season. But the good news is it sounds like the Achilles is healed, and he's doing good there. So they just need to get the hamstring right, because you know how these things are. They can last all season if they don't heal properly. So hopefully they can get that right. And the Browns have enough depth. They don't need to rush Grant Delpit out there. Now, as far as you're talking about OBJ, man, OBJ looks really good, but he's up to this point, he's avoided contact. So, so they're babying him along. He's making his cuts. I mean, if you've seen anything on Twitter, the guy's been flying around super, super fast for a couple months already. Okay. His recovery has been phenomenal. I guess the guy is just kind of superhuman in his ability to recover from something like this fast. But the Browns are being careful, so they're not going to expose him to much. I don't know if he'll play in the third preseason game at all or not, but they've held him out of everything so far as any contact.
Now, I was actually going to jump to another question, but I obviously came up with one in my head. This guy was a former fourth-round draft pick from the Giants about a couple of years ago, and he seemed to do, by the stats, I mean, I could be taking stuff the wrong way. I didn't watch the game, but it seemed to me that Kyle Lauletta had a pretty good game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think it was like 270-something yards or something in that region, but it's going to be interesting. I want to get the view on him from you and maybe other Browns fans, stuff like that. And the same thing on Donovan Peoples-Jones, because I know last year he had a pretty good season for, I think he was a 6th-round pick. But it's gonna be interesting to see, just in my personal opinion, possible many others, with last year's 16-man practice squad. Obviously, it's not returning, but a lot of teams are probably going to keep only 2 quarterbacks and maybe 1 on the practice squad this year. We'll see what happens. But what is the view on Lauletta, and what is the view on Peoples-Jones from last season, being that you could probably, as of right now, consider him as a steal, possibly?
Talking about Kyle Lauletta first, I thought he looked really good. Now, it's one preseason game against, probably the worst team in the league. So But just looking at the way he threw the ball and the way he played and the way he commanded the offense, he looked really good. So I'm anxious to see what he does over the course of the next 2 preseason games. So the conversation amongst fans is kind of, would you be comfortable keeping Kyle Lauletta as the number 2 quarterback and dropping Case Keenum, for salary purposes to pick up some cap space? And people look at it both ways, because the Browns are hopefully trying to make a run this season. So do you want the guy with all that experience, or are you going to try to save the money? And is Kyle Lauletta good enough if something happens to Baker where he misses several weeks for some reason? So that's very interesting to me.
Now,
and go ahead.
I'll continue.
I'm trying to think of what your other point was. You mentioned Kyle Lauletta and somebody else.
It was Kyle Lauletta and Donovan Peoples-Jones.
DPJ has been pretty much the star of training camp, making just tremendous catch after tremendous catch, and it carried over into that first preseason game. So he caught 4 balls early, or maybe it was 3 balls early, and then they pulled him out. Had some great catches. I really think that DPJ is going to be the number 3 receiver on the team this season. And you just go back and look at him being a 6th-round pick last season, and the question was he going to make the team last year and all this stuff? And he was ready when he got called on last year. He did decent. He didn't have huge numbers, but he really didn't get that many opportunities. And now he comes out and he really looks good. So the Browns wide receiver room is crowded. It's really crowded. So, but he stood out, and I think he's going to be the first guy behind OBJ and Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, moving on to a bit of a different subject before we get into the depth chart and stuff like that. Obviously, things can change with the depth chart, but my best friend is a Steelers fan. So obviously he has some feelings about the Browns ever since the Garrett incident and just being in the same division. But how do Browns fans feel about this season, especially after last season? And with the up-and-coming of the Ravens, especially for the last couple of years, the possible fall of Steelers, maybe the up-and-coming of the Bengals. Personally, my prediction, I might refine it a little bit before the season starts. I have the Browns finishing 2nd and making the playoffs within the division. Ravens 1st, Steelers 3rd, Bengals 4th. How do you guys feel? How would you give the Browns in terms of prediction win-loss record. You don't have to do that if you want to, whatever. But how do you guys see yourselves in terms of the division? And if it gets to that point, are you guys making a wild card spot?
I really haven't predicted a record yet for the Browns. I think they'll probably win 13, 14 games this season, though. Just with the improvements on the defense and the way Baker was playing the last 8 or maybe even close to 10 games of last season, and now he's got a few new pieces on offense. The defense is completely revamped. I think the defense is really going to make a difference for him. And the thing is, the Browns actually have some consistency. This is going to be the first time in a while where they've had the same coach and a good coach for the second season in a row, same system, not switching out and getting a new offensive coordinator. I mean, Baker hasn't done this before. He hasn't gone into a second season with the same system. So I think it's going to make a big difference. I think the Browns respect the division. I think the Steelers are probably on the way down. They had an aging roster last year. They've lost some players, but until they miss the playoffs, I think you have to respect the Steelers. They're a model organization, so you can't just say either they're no good. You got to go and beat them. You got to keep beating them consistently, and to prove that you're a better team, better franchise at this point. The Ravens, we'll see. I mean, they're a good team. Browns have had some great games with them over the last couple of seasons. Very entertaining games. So we'll see. I think the Browns. I think the Browns kind of built this defense to stop the Ravens in many ways. They've added a lot of speed. I think they've had Lamar in mind for a lot of this. And if they're successful in being able to beat the Ravens with this new defense, then that's going to be the division. And if they aren't, then the Ravens are probably still going to be at the top of the division.
Now, obviously, every team somewhat has a weakness in terms of position or something like that. Like for the Giants, for example, many Giants fans, including myself, feel the possible weaknesses coming into the season are offensive line. If the outside linebackers in a 3-4 system are there are the pass rushers, they're possibly a weakness, and a couple other positions on the roster. In your opinion, do the Browns have any, whether it be small or big, weaknesses on the roster?
Well, I think Andrew Berry's always looking to upgrade things, but he's never afraid to go out and sign somebody to make the team stronger. But overall, I think if the Browns have a weakness, it could be, they might be looking for. I would probably say, even though they have a lot of depth at linebacker, they have some inexperience there. So. But I think they've got speed, and we'll see. We'll see with Anthony Walker. Assuming he's ready to go week 1 and everything, I think he's going to be. That makes the Browns a lot more solid. And the only other thing is probably the depth at defensive end is kind of in question, because Takk McKinley is kind of on a personal leave of absence right now from the Browns. So we're not really sure what's going on there. If he can come back and be that number 3 defensive end, that really helps the Browns a lot, because beyond him, they've got some guys in camp, that can play a little bit, but not at the level of Miles and Clowney.
So in terms of the depth chart, obviously it changes now from week to week because of cuts. Now there's the new rule that after every preseason game, you have to cut down 5 players. So like this week it was 85, next week it will be 80, and then after that obviously is the big 53-man roster kind of reshape. So in terms of the depth chart, and this is just going to be my personal take down the line, for the Giants in terms of quarterbacks, for the Browns in terms of quarterbacks, I definitely would give the Browns the definite win in terms of battling quarterbacks because the Giants do have. Daniel Jones, obviously, I think Baker Mayfield's better. I mean, that's just me being honest and unbiased. You take a look at the Giants' backup, Mike Glennon. He wasn't really good last week, and then you guys have Case Keenum, who's had more experience in terms of starting games, though Glennon has
He's played
been in the
okay.
league longer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it really comes down to the backups, Brian Lewerke, who's only spent so much time in the NFL as well as the spring league football, but once again that's not really NFL type atmosphere. And then you guys got Kyle Lauletta, who's had a lot of experience in the preseason, so I would definitely give the Browns a W in terms of battling quarterbacks, and I think it would be a good battle.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of running backs, I would definitely have to, and I don't know what the situation is because it is so difficult to determine, who's going to play, who's not going to play. In terms of like preseason games and all of these, star players not playing like OBJ and Jarvis Landry, has Kevin Stefanski, real quickly before I preview this because I don't want to get anything wrong, has Kevin Stefanski come out and said whether Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt will play in the preseason games?
He's kind of taking it week by week, and I don't know that I've heard officially, but I don't think any of the starters will play this week either. My guess is that these guys will play a little bit week 3, and that's probably going to be it. I think his plan is because of the longer season, he wants to keep these guys fresh and healthy and have them ready for the long haul, 17 games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've heard a lot of people criticizing Joe Judge's philosophy is like, oh, well, we're going to play the starters mostly week 3, like the old week 3 of the preseason where you play most of your starters for about a quarter, 2 quarters, stuff like that. I guess similar philosophies are being grown throughout the NFL in terms of, starters week 3. And obviously it is a good strategy. You don't want to hurt those starter players when you have, an extra game added to the season. But obviously you have the good duo in the running back room with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Behind him, likely playing, is Dearness Johnson, Demetric Felton, John Kelly, and Corey Taylor, if I'm not mistaken. You look at the Giants running back chart. They have Devontae Booker, Corey Clement, Sandro Platzkummer, and 6th-round pick Gary Brightwell. So in terms of that on the depth chart, I'd probably have to give it just a little bit to the New York Giants. I feel that the running backs are a little more experienced. I thought Booker did okay last week. Corey Clement, other than the fumble, did okay last week. Platzkummer, the international guy, had a nice run. And I want to see what's out of Gary Brightwell, the 6th-round pick from Arizona. But I definitely do think Demetric Felton and Dearness Johnson put some competition there. And obviously you have John Kelly, who is the veteran running back, former Ram, I believe.
He's bounced around a bit, Bengals and Rams and Browns, and we'll see. He played a bit last week, so I think you're going to see more of Felton and Dearness Johnson probably this week. Be my guess.
So before we jump into wide receivers, tight ends, obviously it's not, tight ends, linebackers are going to do it, tight ends. Evan Ingram, I don't know if he's going to play. That's going to be, honestly, one of my questions coming into the week. How many starters play, how many starters don't play. But as of right now, I guess I'll have him play for a little bit. Caden Smith as well for the New York Giants. Then, obviously, you break into the latter part of the tight end depth chart. You have Nakia Griffin-Stewart, Cole Hicatini, Ryson John, and Jake Hausman, while the Cleveland Browns have Austin Hooper, David Njoku, who showed out a lot in practice today, Harrison Bryant, Jordan Franks, and Connor Davis. Is it likely, and honestly, I hate to keep asking, but have Austin Hooper or are Austin Hooper and David Njoku going to be playing in the preseason games?
Since they didn't play in the first week, I'd kind of be surprised if they play much this week, but you never know. He might work some of these guys in. So, it was a lot of Connor Davis and Jordan Franks in the first preseason game. Harrison Bryant was out there, but I don't think he played, anywhere near the whole game. So he's pretty much a starter too with the other two guys. So it'll be interesting to see if Njoku's out there. I kind of be surprised if if Austin Hooper plays at all.
So in terms of if this was a regular season game, I'd give it to the Cleveland Browns because Evan Ingram had an awful season last year. But in terms of this is a preseason game, Njoku and Hooper are likely not playing. If they are, it's not going to be a lot. I'd probably give it to the Giants on that aspect. You move into the wide receiver room, which you could also match up with the corners. In terms of wide receiver room, OBJ and Jarvis Landry probably not playing. Rashard Higgins, if he's playing, very little. Donovan Peoples-Jones and Kadero Hodge probably getting the most. Anthony Schwartz, is he supposed to return this week?
I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I think he's been practicing again, but I'm not sure where he stands with the hamstring. So I don't want to tell you for sure and be wrong on that.
So obviously that is a big question mark for the Browns coming into this week. Other than that, they have Marcus Bradley, JoJo Knotson, Alexander Hollins, and Davian Davis. Now for the Giants wide receivers, it's likely not that Sterling Shepard's going to play, but the Giants fans should expect to see Darius Slayton. If John Ross is healthy, he'll play David Sills, C.J. Board, Austin Mack, Damian Willis, then Dante Pettis, Alex Backman, and Matt Cole. In terms of wide receiver room, honestly, it's tough on tough, but I'm going to have to give it just a pinch to the Cleveland Browns. I think, honestly, if Higgins plays, if he does, I'm just saying. And then you got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was a steal of a 6th-round pick last year, over Slayton, who was a 5th-round pick a couple of years ago. Has, had a down year last year. Obviously, I think had some targets last week. But there's a lot of inexperience and a lot of veteran journeyman-like players at the back end of the Giants depth chart that aren't necessarily proven. Guys like Dante Pettis and John Ross. But I would definitely slightly, I guess, in my opinion, give it to the Cleveland Browns, but I could flip it both ways as well.
The guy that you want to watch is Davion Davis. He's been with the Browns only a couple of weeks, but he had 6 catches, including just a phenomenal touchdown catch against the Jags and a couple other really nice grabs. And he's the kind of guy, it's like, where did he come from? And he's the kind of guy, if he plays really well, he's going to make the Browns make a really tough decision. So it would be really interesting to see what he does against the Giants.
Definitely looking forward to that. Obviously, I need a list of players myself to look for against the Cleveland Browns on Sunday because I'm not going to lie, I don't know a lot of other players and how they play other than Kyle Lauletta, who played excellent for the Browns. And once again, that was against second, third stringers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of wide receiver corner matchups, obviously, once again, the playbooks are very vanilla. But for the Giants, in terms of the cornerback room, they have James Bradbury and Dory Jackson probably playing just a little bit. Darnay Holmes behind him. Julian Love can play corner as well. Radarius Williams, Jaron Williams. Quincy Wilson can play corner as well. If Sam Beal's healthy this week, Madre Harper. And that pretty much finishes the cornerback room. But in terms of the Browns cornerback room, Greedy Williams, who is actually younger than Radarius Williams. Radarius Williams is 25. He is the older brother of Greedy, which honestly is something I didn't know until they drafted Greedy Williams. Actually drafted Radarius Williams, excuse me.
I didn't know that.
Well, I guess you learn something new every day.
Yeah.
But other than that, they have Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams as mentioned, Troy Hill, the free agent from Los Angeles, Greg Newsome, A.J. Green, Brian Allen, Robert Jackson, M.J. Stewart, Emmanuel Rugamba. And that pretty much, I guess, clears it for the cornerback room. In terms of starters, once again, I'm not sure who's going to play in terms of the Browns at corner. I would maybe guess they play just a tiny bit. What would you say in terms of the corner spot?
Well, I don't think you'll see Denzel Ward. I think you'll probably see Newsome and Greedy playing a bit again because those two are kind of in competition to see who's going to be cornerback 2. We'll see. I think they're both going to play a lot this season anyways. So you know how it is. You need a lot of cornerbacks throughout the season, but it's going to be hard to tell. I mean, the Browns have Denzel Ward, those two guys, and Troy Hill. The Browns are going to be pretty deep. But in this preseason game, probably flip a coin. It's hard to say.
Yeah, definitely. If it was Actually, I'm going to have to take my team on this one. I think the Giants are just slightly better at cornerback. I think James Bradbury, coming off of last year, is one of the more underrated corners in the NFL. If it's not underrated, he's one of the top. Adoree Jackson, personally, a lot of Giant fans are saying, "Oh well, he was, he was underused in Tennessee, this, that, and the other thing." I need to see out of him. He's probably one of my top players to look for in this game because
A lot of potential.
Yeah, obviously he was known as a draft bust in Tennessee. So I want to see what he does here now with Patrick Graham, who is known to really use corners to their strengths, whether they're good or not. He did that with Isaac Yiadom last year, who just got traded to Green Bay. So I think the Giants are deep at corner. You could say the same for the Cleveland Browns, but I would slightly take the New York Giants on this one. But if Denzel Ward was playing, if Greedy Williams, played a little more, probably, we'll see what happens. I would consider the Cleveland Browns to be the winner of the corner matchup because I think they're deep, but also with the Giants as well, other than Adoree Jackson and James Bradbury, two good corners. Let's see, once again, we'll see what happens. But behind that, there's some experience you have to kind of admit if you're a Giants fan. Aaron Robinson, who's on the PUP list, Keon Carlson, who they just traded for, Josh Jackson, who they just traded for as well from the Green Bay Packers. So right now I would take the Giants in terms of who's playing on Sunday, but obviously take the Browns into consideration if this was a regular season game.
Right. I would agree with you. Yeah.
In terms of the offensive line, obviously, I think the Giants would definitely, if you're doing O-line versus O-line, I think the Giants would definitely lose. I would have to admire the building the Cleveland Browns have done the past year and the work that Bill Callahan has done for the Cleveland Browns O-line. I mean, it's just a great O-line all around, probably one of the better O-lines. So in terms of O-line versus O-line, I would definitely give them the first and the second team because it looks like the second team is a pretty good team. Chris Hubbard, the former tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers, played with the Browns a couple of years before. I think ranging back to 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Nick Harris, the former Washington draft pick, played a little for you guys last year. Same thing with Michael Dunn. So I definitely think you guys have a lot of depth at the O-line position. Where with the Giants, it's not necessarily the same story because the news obviously loves to put this on, but two O-linemen retired this past offseason for the Giants, Joe Looney and Zach Fulton. So if those two didn't retire, I would take into consideration, but right now we are looking for an answer at the backup guard position. We don't know if Shane Lemieux is going to play this week, so definitely I would give them the O-line spot, but in terms of O-line versus D-line, I'd give the D-line to you guys in that matchup. D-line wins against the O-line because the Giants are growing. They're trying to gel that O-line. Obviously, the defense for the Browns, especially the defensive line with Myles Garrett and some of the other guys on there, is very good. In terms of the O-line, let's be honest. I'm going to be honest with myself here. The Giants only got to Baker once last year in that game, and their defensive line was fully healthy. Dexter Lawrence was the one who got to him. Other than that, there was like maybe 3-4 other pressures. And they lost Dalvin Tomlinson, who could also rush the passer. Unfortunately, they lost him to the Minnesota Vikings. Other than that, they have Danny Shelton and Austin Johnson. Sure, they're good role players, but, against that O-line last year, they didn't do well. They slightly downgraded at that position, and I would not expect anything different, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and the Browns had a period last year where the offensive line went where they gave up like 1 or 2 sacks over like 5 games. So, Jedrick Wills has he's on his second season this year, so you got to figure he's going to look a little better at left tackle. And they have everybody else back. So if these guys can stay healthy, and they've got other guys behind them have looked really good. Michael Dunn's looked really good. A lot of people really like him, and you mentioned a lot of the other guys. A lot of good backups there if something happens.
Now, in terms of the linebacker position for both teams, obviously there are concerns. For the Giants, we don't know who's going to pair next to Blake Martinez, who had an awesome season last year. There is some experience behind the linebackers for the Cleveland Browns as well. To headline them real quick, they have Mac Wilson, Anthony Walker, Sion Taki, Elijah Lee, Jacob Phillips, JOK, and Malcolm Smith. You look at the New York Giants linebacking core, to be specific, not including outside linebackers, just the inside spot. Tay Crowder, Blake Martinez, Devontae Downs, T.J. Brunson, who is, well, I should update that. He tore his ACL. Ryan Anderson, I'm surprised he did not play. But Blake Martinez, Reggie Ragland, and Carter Coughlin. Other than that, in terms of that, I already outlined the two. I would probably say just a little bit on the Giants side. Obviously, JOK played well last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but Blake Martinez and Reggie Ragland, they're veterans. You know, Reggie Ragland isn't the greatest linebacker of all time. Everybody knows that. He was kind of a draft bust with, I believe, it was the Buffalo Bills, and he's been bouncing from place to place. But I think Patrick Graham is going to make it work where, oh my God, we don't need, a second star linebacker. It's going to be Reggie Ragland, Tay Crowder, and a couple other guys within the inside spot. And Carter Coughlin, the 7th-round pick from Minnesota from last year, he played well against the Jets, making a total of 5 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss. And he just converted from the edge position. So, it was definitely encouraging to see, and obviously his versatility plays into that. But I'm going to give the New York Giants the slight edge at linebacker. Obviously, Mack Wilson was the pick out of Alabama a couple of years ago. They do have Malcolm Smith, the Super Bowl champion from the Seattle Seahawks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Malcolm Smith's kind of probably fighting for a job. Mack Wilson's been injured again, and so it kind of comes down to JOK. Anthony Walker's not going to play. You'll see Malcolm Smith. You'll see Jacob Phillips, who was a draft pick last year, and he was injured a lot last season, so he doesn't have a lot of experience. He's a guy that's got a lot of speed, a lot of tools. So, but he's still developing, but he's got a lot of promise. So, you'll see those guys, and you'll see Taki. Taki will play because there's just really not that many other guys that they're going to put out there right now. So, the Browns have some guys, but they're kind of fighting the injury bug right now. And I'm kind of hoping everybody's ready by week 1.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, once again, this is week 2 of the preseason, developing draft picks and stuff like that. But if I was a head coach, if you were a head coach, if a lot of other people were head coaches, they'd probably say, hey, let's save these guys for week 1, which is more important than week 2 of the preseason. But slightly, I would give the Giants the linebacker spot. So real quickly, going into the safety spot, which is probably the last spot where we're going to preview for today. The Giants have Jabril Peppers and Logan Ryan. Then you break into the second squad, which is Julian Love and Xavier McKinney. Then you break into the 3 squad, which is Quincy Wilson, Montre Hartage, and Chris Johnson. Then you look at the safety spot for the Cleveland Browns. They signed John Johnson, Ronnie Harrison, the former Jacksonville Jaguar, Grant Delpit obviously making his way. I don't know that he'll play a lot. If he does, probably not.
Yeah, he's not going to play. I don't think any of those 3 guys will play, actually. I don't think any of those 3 guys will play. Ronnie Harrison, I guess, is potential, but I'd kind of be surprised if he plays because he's just coming back off a hamstring, too. So they'll probably hold him out.
So that probably makes my deciding in terms
makes
of
your decision a little bit easier. I mean, the Browns have some other guys that are playing well. So Richard LeCounte looked really good in the first season, in the first preseason game, but he's a rookie, 6th-round pick. So, how much weight are you going to put on him? But he really looked like he knows what he's doing. Javante Moffett has been excellent in practice for the Browns. He's been on the team for a few years. And then, that's pretty much it.
So for the Giants, obviously you also mentioned on the back end what they have. So probably in terms of this, I'd probably just say cut to the chase. The Giants slightly have a better safety crew. Obviously, that can definitely go into debate if this was a regular season game and if everybody was healthy. Because John Johnson obviously was a good signing. Grant Delpit would probably be healthy in the regular season. Sheldrick Redwine, Ronnie Harrison, etc., etc. But I would give the Giants the slight W there. That pretty much, I guess, wraps it up for the preview. Rod, any last words, man? Thank you for coming on once again.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Good talking to you. And I just, it'll be fun watching the game. I actually enjoy these preseason games not only to watch football, but to watch these guys deep down on the roster that are fighting for spots and to see how they perform. And because they're fighting for their NFL life, and they can do some special things out there, so it's pretty cool. So, but so I'm looking for a good game. I hope it's a great game between the Browns and the Giants, but most of all, I hope nobody gets hurt on either team.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, a lot of people have turned off the mode of liking the preseason of the last couple of years because of injury concerns and stuff like that. I like to see, summer football and stuff like that, especially with the young guys, once again, like you said, fighting for their lives, fighting for their NFL careers. A lot of people won't understand being that position, but it's their thoughts, their prerogative, whatever. But if you guys haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification buttons to get notified when live stream pops video drops. Rod, thanks for coming on, man. Hope the Giants and Browns play a good game on Sunday.
Absolutely.